If you're a Miami sports fan, it's got to be a series of highs and lows. The Heat are the defending NBA champions. The Miami Marlins were a joke this past season. The U is more like, nowadays. But then you get to the Miami Dolphins. I don't care what the Heat do. I don't care what anybody else does. Even the U now. That's a Dolphins town. And I would think, I would have to imagine, I would have to think that Dolphins fans would have to be at least somewhat encouraged with what they saw out of their team, their franchise in 2012. You went 7-9, finished second in the AFC East. You've got the 12th overall pick coming up in this April's draft. Now, offensively, going into last year's draft, I was a very big proponent that maybe no organization in sports, in the NFL, needed more to draft a quarterback in the first round than the Miami Dolphins. Like I think this year it has to be the Kansas City Chiefs. Last year to me, it had to be the Miami Dolphins. And to me, it had to be Ryan Tannehill. Because it didn't really benefit them, I didn't think, to trade their ass up to go get Luck at 1 or RG3 at 2. I thought maybe they were actually going to have to trade up at one point in time the way things were freaking looking for that draft to 3 or 4 to go get Tannehill. They got lucky. He came down to them at pick 8. They had to take him. And I was very adamant that they had to take him. Because ultimately, you could draft for this need or for that need or whatever the hell. But if you don't have a franchise quarterback in the NFL, you really don't have shit. Period. And to me, the Miami Dolphins did the right thing and a necessary step to trying to get back to the land of real NFL relevance and potentially down the road becoming a Super Bowl contender by taking a quarterback, taking Ryan Tannehill, 8th overall in last April's NFL draft. He's inconsistent at times, but that was to be expected. He was very raw. This is a kid that played receiver for a couple years at Texas A&M. Just that last 2 seasons had played quarterback. He wasn't going to be the polished, finished product of an Andrew Luck or an RG3 or a guy taken in the 3rd round like Russell Wilson. But that doesn't mean he still wasn't the right guy, and that still doesn't mean that his upside isn't tremendous, and that doesn't mean at times that he didn't show me, that he has some of what I thought he had coming out of Texas A&M. Inconsistent at times, which is to be expected, but also showed some promise. You had a guy like Brian Hartline went out and had a 1,000-yard season with Tannehill at the helm. So that's something else that has to be encouraging. They did, finish towards the bottom of the pack, 27th overall in offensive yardage and in points per game. But you're starting somewhere. That's the positive. That's the good thing. Defensively, this is a strength of the team between the two sides of the ball. Not an overwhelming strength, but compared to the offense, it's still by far the weaker of the 2 areas of the football team. They gave up quite a bit of yardage, 21st in total yardage allowed and 27th in passing yardage allowed, which I suppose shouldn't be that surprising since they traded Vontae Davis before the season started to the Indianapolis Colts. But even though they gave up a lot of yardage at times, they still tightened up when they needed to and finished 7th in the NFL in points allowed, 7th in the NFL in sacks. They did a decent job of generating pass rush, even though at times when I saw him in 2012, it felt like Cameron Wake was the only guy that was really getting any pressure at all. One bugaboo for this defense, they don't create a lot of big plays, meaning a lot of turnovers. They tied for 27th in interceptions and had absolutely 0 defensive touchdowns. And when you have a young rookie quarterback, one way to help him out and to relax him and make him feel more confident is to help cover some of his mistakes by forcing mistakes from the other team. And the Miami Dolphins defense did not do a great job of that in 2012. This offseason, they have quite a number of free agents, some more important maybe to keep than others. You've got former #1 overall pick in 2008, Jake Long. He hit the free agent market. Yeah. This organization paid a big price for not taking Matt Ryan #1 in 2008. Reggie Bush is a free agent. Brian Hartline's a free agent. Randy Starks, Chris Clemens, Anthony Fasano, Sean Smith, and some others. Like I said again, some that are more important than others. But the bottom line is that front office in Miami, Coach Philbin, are going to have to figure out what pieces they want to keep, what pieces they could do without, and what pieces they're going to want to replace, maybe taking some of that money that they have under the cap and spending it in the free agent market, and what they're going to do coming up in this 2013 NFL draft. As far as looking at how the Dolphins have got to this point, let's take a look at their 5-year draft history. Looking at how the Dolphins have drafted the past 5 years, there are picks that are solid, and then there are a couple of picks in particular that are, oh, God. Patrick Turner. Oh, excuse me. Got some pad in my throat. Yeah, those were bad. When you're spending second-round picks on guys like Pat White and Patrick Turner, and they become the colossal flops that they did, it's not a surprise that you're 7-9 instead of 9-7 or 10-6. Just flat out. The second round is still a great place to find very, very good players, sometimes Pro Bowl players, and sometimes you find an All-Pro or hell, even a Hall of Famer that slips through the cracks and gets into that round. And you spend second-round picks on guys like Pat White and Patrick Turner. It's not a good thing. Even a guy like Sean Smith, I think he's been okay, but he definitely hasn't been anything special. I will give the Dolphins credit for this. The last 3 first-round picks they've had I really like. Odrick, I think, is at least effective and solid as a defensive lineman. Mike Pouncey may very well be the better of the 2 Pouncey brothers at center. Mike Pouncey is a freaking stud. And what a great center point. What a great building block on an offensive line. What a great anchor to have to protect your 2012 first-round pick, your hopefully franchise quarterback Ryan Tannehill, than to have Mike Pouncey being the guy snapping him the damn ball. So these last 3 first-round picks have been pretty good, and traditionally, if you hit on your first-round picks enough years in a row, that tends to be foreboding of something good happening very, very soon. And when you look at the 2012 draft, mine has taken the tight end Agnew in the 3rd round, which was just a mind-blowing, stupid thing. Everybody else looks like a contributor to some degree, shape, or level out of that draft class. The Dolphins had a very good draft in 2012, which you would think would bode well for 2013 and especially 2014. It's those type of things. When that good draft class happens, traditionally what happens the next season after that, and especially the following season, you start to see marked significant improvements. Which brings us to the Dolphins' draft philosophy coming up in April. Now, with the Vontae Davis trade to the Colts, they have 2 second-round picks. They've got their first-round pick at number 12, 2 second-round picks, and a third-round pick. And the bottom line is I think it's apparent to most everyone that observes the Dolphins or watches the Dolphins or is a Dolphins fan, the primary needs come on the offensive side of the football. Now, obviously, if they don't re-sign Jake Long, offensive line is going to go much higher up on the priorities. And I still think that offensive line should at least be in the consideration somewhere to be addressed, even if Jake Long is re-signed, which I'm not sure he will be, even if that comes in the middle rounds just for depth purposes. But what the Dolphins really need to meet are 2 things above all else. And that is a real number 1 wide receiver, a playmaker on the outside, and a playmaking number 1 tight end. Now, you could see the Dolphins potentially be a team that gets a guy like Cordero Patterson to fall to them at number 12, and that's the guy they take, and that's their number 1 wide receiver. Maybe they take a Keenan Allen because Patterson's already off the board, or they like Allen better at 12. I'm not quite convinced yet that Keenan Allen is a great playmaker, but he would fit at least some of the mold of being a dependable number 1 target. Again, more weapons for your young franchise quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. Now you get to the 2nd round. This is a team that, with those 2 second-round picks, I think could try and get a little cute here. They could sit there and make a big move and maybe package up both second-round picks and move way up into the 1st round to get a second first-round pick and take a tight end or a wide receiver and offensive tackle, or take a 2nd and 3rd round pick, which is what I think they should do, trade up with somebody like I've mentioned before in another video, like Chicago at 20, St. Louis with Washington's 1st-round pick, St. Louis at 22, and that's maybe where they can address the tight end position, getting Ertz from Stanford or Eifert from Notre Dame. And if they do that, you'd either still have a 3rd-round pick there, or you'd still have a 2nd-round pick there, where you could take another wide receiver, maybe a guy like Stedman Bailey from West Virginia. If a Tavon Austin or a Robert Woods drops to him in the 2nd round, well, there you go. Or in the 3rd round, you could address offensive line depth, or you could try and find a slot receiver there as well. As far as some other guys they could potentially take, they could, like I said, want to explore taking a safety at some point in the middle rounds, maybe a corner, but ultimately this draft has to be about offense. You drafted Ryan Tannehill in the 1st round. You have to build around him. Things look good for Miami. They had a really good draft class in 2012. Tannehill showed some promise. Give him another year to develop. Put some more weapons around him. Maybe even give him a little bit more protection. And you could be looking at a Dolphins team that heading into the 2014 season could be very, very scary.